So today we are going to talk about all the work that you are continuously doing, and we understand the challenges that you face as you're trying to build relationships with corrections and with your facilities. So we felt that it was important to go back and have these conversations again, and that's how we began developing Introduction to Year 4 of the California Advancing PREA project, Chasing the Work. My name is Juliana Baez, and I am the Training and Technical Assistance Specialist for the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or CALCASA. I will be co-presenting with Matthew Van Winkle and Chris Mady, who are both program officers at Detention International, or JDI.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our webinar. JDI is a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual violence in all forms of detention. It's our fundamental belief that when the government takes away someone's freedom, it takes on an absolute responsibility to protect that person's safety. No matter what crime someone has committed, rape is not part of the penalty.
And the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or CALCASA, is committed to ending sexual violence through a multifaceted approach of prevention, intervention, education, and research, advocacy, and public policy. CALCASA provides leadership, vision, and resources to rape crisis centers, individuals, and other entities committed to ending sexual violence. CALCASA envisions a world free from sexual violence. The California Office of Emergency Services provides the funding for the California Advancing PREA project, which is now entering its 4th year. This project allows CALCASA and JDI to partner in offering support and guidance to California rape crisis centers on how to build strong relationships with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, our CDCR staff, and how to create sustainable agreements and protocols for the provision of victim services to survivors. Earlier in the project, the California Advancing PREA team focused on fundamental culture change on both the corrections and the advocacy side. Over time, we've put many MOUs in place between CDCR facilities and their local RCCs. We provide technical training and assistance wherever it's needed. And although much progress has been made, we understand that there continues to be a gap and challenges in the services available to survivors behind bars. At this time, I invite you to share with us what organization are you from and what facility or facilities you are providing services to. And we encourage you to type that in the chat box. Today's agenda will begin the conversation of bridging the gap on corrections culture. We will hear from 3 of our 6 peer leader agencies who bring a diverse approach to chasing the work of providing services to incarcerated survivors, and what steps we can take as we are chasing the work, and present ongoing resources and some upcoming training. Today's training focuses on how we can get into our correctional facilities. As always, we encourage you to please practice self-care during this webinar. Take a few deep breaths, stand up, do some yoga. We also encourage you to color or draw or doodle. We send a few coloring pages for your enjoyment, so please feel free to do that through the webinar today.
Thank you, Juliana. It's good to be with everyone. This is Matthew Van Winkle of JDI. And let's start with our first agenda point here, bridging the gap, a little section we put together on helping us understand corrections culture, the folks that you're going to need to be partnering with. And I'd like to start with just getting really basic and maybe painting a picture for a possible day you might have at your agency. So you're an advocate. You've attended trainings on surviving incarcerated survivors. You have educated your fellow staff about this issue. Perhaps you've even modified the language of job listings that you're posting to reflect that positions will work in detention settings as well as in the community. You've done the work, you've made yourself familiar with the PREA standards, and you've identified the PREA compliance manager at the detention facility in your service area, and you're confident that all you have to do is make contact, to reach out, and they're going to beat a path to your door. After all, aren't they required by PREA to ensure access to the services that you provide? You spend some time drafting a thoughtful email introducing yourself and the services your agency offers. You double check that you're addressing the CDCR staffer by their proper rank, and you click send. And then you wait. And then you wait a little longer. After a week, you start to wonder, does this person still work there? Did I type their email address correctly? You know that they need you in order to be in compliance, and more importantly, you know that there are survivors living in the prison who need your help as of yesterday. So you find the email in your outbox, you send it again with a little note. Just making sure you got this. I'm sure you're very busy. I'd love to meet and discuss how we can work in partnership. And then a week goes by without a response, then another week, and you find yourself busy with other projects, as we all do. And after some more time without a response, you just don't feel as excited or as confident about reaching back out to the facility. If this story sounds familiar, we want you to know you're not alone, and that's a big part of the reason we're doing this presentation today. It's in recognition of the fact that many of you have shared stories like this one with us. And when you're ignored, either in a personal or professional setting, it does not feel good. Next slide. So here are two truths, two things that we know. The first, it can be difficult, demoralizing, frustrating, and intimidating to partner with CDCR staff. And second, there are survivors of sexual abuse and sexual harassment living in CDCR state facilities who need your help. So how can we keep our focus on what we can control? How can we take ownership of our own process of getting into our local facilities to help these survivors? Next slide. So here are some things you can do, things you can control without any help from CDCR staff or any reach back. First, you can make your own communications plan and stick to it. You see serving incarcerated survivors as part of your work, part of your mission. So it's your work. You own it. It's as easy as setting a recurring reminder on your phone or calendar. Make it a routine, something that works for you. Your own reach out plan of emailing or calling. It can be the same weekday, once every 2 or 3 weeks, or it can be a monthly minimum number of attempts to reach out. So remember, you own your work and you're here for survivors. Your job is not to keep the inboxes of CDCR staff manageable. Second, you can set up a system to document your outreach efforts. This is very important, so that when you do hear back, you can say, oh yes, thanks for responding to my email of May 31st, or, oh, it's been a while, I'm glad you finally reached back out. This can be on a simple spreadsheet, or even a shared whiteboard in your office that everyone who's reaching out to CDCR can use and share. You can even get a little competitive with it. Which one will hear back from CDCR staff first? I know it sounds a little silly, but sometimes it takes a little bit of a game mentality to kind of just get that foot in the door. And third, don't let the subject burn for a while and then flare out. Keep abuse in detention a living topic at your agency. Make sure that if it hasn't been discussed for a while, be the one to bring it back up. Hey, what's going on at this facility? Hey, did you see this news item? It looks like there's a new warden. It looks like there's new staff. Maybe we should reach out and try this again. Next slide, please. So in Juliana's email to us all reminding us of this webinar, there was included a link to a YouTube video, a CDCR-produced recruitment video. And I'm not sure, has anyone had time to see it? I hope so. I understand if it hasn't been possible. If you did see it, we can't play the video, unfortunately, here on this webinar, so I'll just give a little rundown. The first thing I want to say is that CDCR employs nearly 67,000 people. That's a big number. 24,000 of those people are what are known as peace officers. Those are people that even though we don't use this term, we think of as guards, people you think of when you think of a prison guard, someone walking down a hallway leading someone in handcuffs, someone who's monitoring activity in cells, either in person or on a bank of monitors. And the majority of CDCR sites tend to be placed out in rural areas or in smaller cities where the prison is often the biggest employer for the community. So consider your own journey to advocacy. Many of you are here because you're passionate about people's rights to be free and to heal, free from harm and to heal when they've been harmed. Sometimes we see in the facilities there's a lack of equal passion. It really has to do with, well, this is the best opportunity for me in my area. I don't want to move away from my family. This is the best option for me. So if you've seen this video, you can see that they focus on, it's edited very fast to give it kind of an exciting feel, and there's some music behind it that makes it seem very exciting, like a police show on television. It emphasizes kind of the long history of service of the department, and it shows you some very unique settings, cool old buildings that look like castles. That is, in fact, Folsom State Prison. Seems like it would be a fun place to work or interesting. They emphasize the values of loyalty, teamwork, camaraderie. It seems like there's a lot of respect given and respect offered between roles. And they emphasize that when you work for corrections, you're keeping people safe from the community by keeping track of people who might do harm if they were in the outside community. They emphasize that you're going to be working with guns and dogs, and they show a big room with lots of TV monitors that looks like a secret hideout or the Bat Cave. So it looks very cool for a certain mindset. And they also emphasize the levels of promotion, that you can have your entire career at CDCR, and there's a very, very clear ladder of promotion. So if you haven't seen the video yet, we do recommend that you take a look at it at some point, maybe following the webinar. I will put it here in the chat box so you can all take a look. And next slide, please. Just to kind of give us a sense of some of the internal culture there at CDCR and why someone might find themselves there. And all organizations have a structure. We thought this slide would be useful to include just because it is very different from most of the staffing structures that we are familiar with at our agencies or at our organizations. You can see that it's modeled very closely on kind of a militaristic model. And we did think this slide would be helpful just because many times we get questions about, oh, who does a lieutenant report to? Is a sergeant above a captain or vice versa? And yeah, next slide, please. So from a corrections standpoint, a good day at work is a day without any stories to tell. Think about it. If safety and security are your goals, then surprises and the unknown is your enemy. And I want to read a quote out now from Chief John Johnson of Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Department. Chief Johnson says that in corrections, change is a four-letter word. No one likes change, but if leadership is consistent, what was change one day becomes standard operating procedure the next. So we can see there's a little chink of light that there's always going to be some resistance to change, some defensive posturing when it comes to, oh, you want to come into my facility? Oh, you want to talk to us about what we're doing? You want to know about our procedures? And that's going to be very common. But once you're in there, and once you're showing that you are a consistent, reliable professional whose role can actually make their job easier and the overall environment safer, there is going to be a possibility for sustainable partnership. So even though a phone call from you right now might be an unwanted surprise or a change of routine, there is the possibility for true partnership. But we always remember that working with corrections requires strategic thinking and balance around accountability and building relationships, all while prioritizing survivors' needs. That's really why we're all doing this.
Thank you, Matthew. Now we'll hear from some of our peer leaders who they have the experience working with their CDCR side. We're going to hear from 3 rape crisis centers in the project who have been chasing the work within their agency's capacity. We've asked them to share some things that have worked, some that have not, and who they've identified as their allies within the walls. First, we are going to hear from RCS Fresno. RCS Fresno provides services to Pleasant Valley State Prison. Welcome, RCS Fresno, and today we have Claudia. Claudia, can you hear us?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. So, Claudia, can you share with us a little bit about, so we had an opportunity to talk to our peer leaders prior to the webinar, and these are some of the highlights and some of the topics that they wanted us to discuss during the webinar. So, Claudia, can you share a little bit with us some of the challenges that you encounter as you were chasing this work?
Yes, so some of the challenges that we encountered was, to be honest, not knowing where to start.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big challenge, just not knowing, what was going to be our starting point. And then also once we were able to identify what our plan was going to be and how we were going to go about initiating that first contact with our facility, not getting the responses that we were hoping for. I know within our work, we're used to sending out emails or making phone calls and leaving messages to other professionals or other individuals and that we work with, and then getting a response within, maybe the latest 2 days. But this wasn't the case with our facility. It was taking a while to get their response from them. Also, not knowing the way that the facility operates, just having to be a whole different culture than what we're used to. So that was a big challenge because throughout the conversations with other agencies or, just with our supervisors, there was a lot of terminology that we didn't really understand. So it was just also, that was also presenting a challenge for us, the lack of knowledge of the facility operations, and then not knowing, too, going back to the emails and when we were trying to reach certain individuals in that facility, not knowing what their work schedule looked like, not knowing if they were Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, or just trying to figure out what that facility operations look like. Also, once we weren't able to make contact again and then, just requesting certain things, information, and then taking a while for us to get that information, that was also a challenge. And like Matthew had mentioned earlier, it was a little frustrating at first, or maybe feeling defeated because we were sending all these emails or making these phone calls and we weren't getting a lot in return. So it kind of felt like we were being, kind of ignored, and it was a little discouraging at first. Another challenge was, attempting to form a connection without the in-person meeting. I think that was like the biggest challenge. It was very difficult to make that connection with the facility over emails and phone calls. That was just not, that was the big challenge for us.
Thank you for sharing that, Claudia. And, as we are, towards in the beginning of year 4, we've heard these things often, right? So can you share a little bit more with us about where, you shared that you weren't certain where to start, and how did that conversation happen maybe with your supervisors or with your leadership, and who do you turn to ask these questions and identify what the next step would be? Can you share a little bit about how that works?
Okay. So the way that I was able to identify what our next step was, I reached out to Matthew, and then he referred me to the MOU. And in that MOU, there was the contact information for the TCM for our facility. So I did reach out to him, and then he introduced me to the lieutenant that he works with, and he's also on PREA, so he introduced me to him. So we were able to establish a point of contact, and that was the way that we went about that, just reaching out for help, because we knew the way that we were trying to go about it was not, we weren't successful, and we knew that, just sending all these emails was not going to, it wasn't producing the results that we were hoping for, so we reached out for help.
Good. Thank you for sharing that, Claudia. So now can we talk a little bit about the things that worked, right, and the reasons why they worked, and you are talking now about thinking a little bit more outside the box and how the initial thoughts of how you're going to have the conversations with them or how you were going to approach them or reach out to them weren't necessarily being too successful, right? So share with us a little bit about what worked.
One of the things that I feel that was like the main key for us establishing this relationship was the in-person site visit. After we had that initial in-person site visit, and we were able to introduce ourselves, and then they were able to introduce themselves, we were able to have a meeting, and they were able to understand what services we were offering, and we were also able to understand what it is that they did and how they did it. So that was like the main thing that helped us establish that relationship. After that site visit, we were very consistent with our communication, and a lot of the emails that we were sending back and forth was just, checking in. Do you have any referrals for me? How's your week going? Just checking in, not wanting to lose that connection that we had made, because I knew how long it had taken us to establish that. So just, being consistent with the communication. And a lot of those emails, like I mentioned, it wasn't even so much requesting, certain things. One of the things that I was emailing and having trouble with was the volunteer training. So there would be some times where I would email just to say, hi, how's your week going? We're here if you need us. Even though I knew there was things that were pending that I wanted to accomplish, I still, kind of took a step back, and I didn't want to come on too strong, and I kind of wanted to just give that time for them to see that, we're there to support and help them, with their mission, which is to keep, the inmates safe, and we were just there to assist them, so I didn't want to come on too strong. So I kind of just sought out opportunities to bring up certain things. Like during our start meeting, we did have the lieutenant come out, and that was an opportunity that I took to ask about the volunteer training. And I know I had emailed them a few times, but I didn't want to keep on saying the same thing over and over and over again. So I just kind of like look for different opportunities to just ask or make requests and kind of check in with them. Just letting them know we're here and we're just here to provide services, and we weren't there to tell them what to do, but we just want to present ourselves in a way that they knew we were here if they needed us and they can count on us. And some of that also led to, and I think this is coming up on our next slide, but we were able to establish a really good relationship where they were able to trust us with inmates who were seeking services, and just keeping that consistent communication going led to the relationship that we have with them now, and we have a great relationship with our facility now.
Great, and I think you mentioned a lot of really good things. That consistency was key, right? That making yourself present, and that might look differently, right? That you were taking every opportunity that you could to say hi, to remind them of who you are, to just be that face for RCS Fresno without being too intrusive. And a lot of the times, as advocates, we want to be in there and do what we are there for, to provide services to survivors. But because we are, just joining a different system, then we have to understand that our conversation might look a little bit different. So a lot of the information that you share, I feel, is very very good so that we can start thinking outside the box, that things might not happen in a very structured way, and that if one thing doesn't work, then we move on to a different thing, or we approach the conversation in a different way. Thank you for sharing that, Claudia. And now, can you share a little bit with us of what you are most proud of? Because, you know, you've been part of the project as well, and there's been a lot of things that have happened throughout the years. So share a little bit about, you know, where you are right now with RCS Fresno and PREA, and what is your sources of pride?
We have come a long way with our facility, and we have, like I mentioned, a great relationship. Our relationship has improved. With the lieutenant now, if there is a survivor that's needing to speak with a counselor, he will he'll call the office, he'll ask to speak with me, and then he'll ask me if we can schedule something, and again, because we want to keep that relationship going, I, you know, try to do it right away. So if I'm available right there and then, I let him know, you know, just give me a call back in 5 minutes and, you know, let me get ready, or, you know, if I'm taking care of something. So we schedule that right away. We don't want to wait till you know, later during the day, because we want to let them know that if we went in there during our site visit and let them know that these were the services that we were going to provide to them, that we're consistent with that, and that when they are reaching out, they're getting exactly what we said that they were going to get from the beginning, and we're not switching it up on them halfway through it. So we want to come across as being reliable, and then that they can trust us. So that's one of our sources of pride, which is just getting those phone calls, and then the lieutenant letting us know, I have someone that wants to speak with the counselor. Can we schedule something? So that to me is it's a big source of pride, because we didn't have that at the beginning. That was not. I didn't even think that would be something that we would be doing. Just because there was the challenges at the beginning, I never thought this was one of the things that we would get out of it. But we have, and, you know, it's something that we do take pride in. The other thing is completing our follow-up services. That is the big one for us. We do respond to forensic exams, and a lot of the survivors that are incarcerated from different detention centers, not only from the facility in our service area, they are brought into Fresno County to the Community Regional Medical Center to have the forensic exam completed. And we were having one of the biggest difficulties that we were having was providing follow-up services. It was a big challenge for us. So during our first in-person site visit with our facility, we brought that up, and we were able to make those arrangements for when the lieutenant picks up the phone, and then he'll schedule something with us so we can complete those, provide those services to the survivors. So that was one of the things that came out of that site visit. And then now with our follow-up services, we have improved. We're able to provide those services, whether it's by written correspondence or through the phone. So that's one of the biggest accomplishments too, because when I first started, that was one of the questions that I would always ask myself. Like, we're going out, we're responding, we're providing information, we're providing the companionment, the advocacy during that forensic exam accompaniment, but then what happens after? Like, we didn't have a clue of, like, you know, what's going to happen next with this survivor. Are they going to receive the follow-up services or from the facility, or how does that look like? But I think that's a big source of pride for us, just knowing that now. And it's up to the survivor. You know, it's their option. We just provide them with their options, and if they're wanting us to provide that follow-up service, and then, you know, they do sign a release of information, and then we're able to do that. But now it's there, and it's an option for them. Before, for us, it was really an option. We weren't able to provide those follow-up services, but now it's up to the survivor, and if they're wanting to receive those follow-up services, it is something that's available to them. And I think that's a big source of pride for our agency, that we were able to get to the point to where we're at now with our facility.
Thank you. Thank you for all that information, Claudia. And we encourage all the participants on the webinar to ask questions. And all of our peer leaders and all of the RCCs who are participating in the webinar today are at different levels when it comes to providing services and the work that they're doing related to PREA. So if anything that Claudia says triggers any questions, you might be in the same position that she was before, or that she solved something that sounds very similar to what you're going through, don't hesitate to ask these questions. We can always connect you to all our participants. They are a bucket of information, and they're very insightful. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us today, Claudia, and for just being so amazing and working so hard so that at the end of the day, survivors can get some of your services.
Thank you.
So thank you. So now we are going to hear from Valley Oasis. Valley Oasis provides services to the California State Prison in Los Angeles, and they are located in Lancaster, California. Welcome, Valley Oasis.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. We have Angelina and Taylor, correct?
Yes.
They are part of the amazing team that has been doing a lot of work with survivors behind bars. Angelina has been part of the project for a bit now, right, Angelina? And even though her role is not as big as it was before, she's still a big part of the development of this relationship building. So can you guys share a little bit about the challenges that you encountered as you were beginning the work?
Sure. In the beginning, the CDCR had some trust issues with us. They weren't sure what our role was, how we were going to go in and basically tell them how to do their job.
Angelina, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? It sounds very like there's an echo, so I'm not sure if you're on the speaker or you're too far from the speaker.
How does that sound?
The same.
The same. Hold on. Is that better?
That's a little bit better, yes.
Okay. It might just be the phone. Okay, so we were facing some trust issues with the CDCR. They were worried about their officer safety as well as our safety going into the prison. So we had to build that concept of we're there to help you. This is our role. If you talk with us about how the facility works, what we need to know about your facility when we go in there to help follow safety rules and regulations, then we'll follow them. So that was a big part of building trust with them, as well as letting them know that we have a really good relationship with our local law enforcement as well. And so that slowly started breaking down the walls for them to start to trust us.
So trust was a big part of it, right? And it was important for Valley Oasis to start that relationship with being clear of the services that you were going to be able to provide and just having that transparency so that there weren't any questions when you were inside the facility. Can you share a little bit more about that initial meeting that happened where you were able to just identify your role?
So what had happened was initially the meeting happened between the powers that be, between Valley Oasis and CDCR Lancaster, and we kind of started off on the wrong foot with them, basically going in and telling them that this is a federal mandate and you must do this, which made things really hard. So we had a first meeting with them, and all of the ISU staff came down, including their captain, and sat down, and we kind of had having the Jesus conversation, basically, between both organizations, and just laid out what our concerns were, what our roles and responsibilities were, and how we can work together. At that time, the captain was able to really express to us what his concerns were about having females come into an all-male prison. You know, there are a lot of safety issues Are inmates going to be manipulating the system just to see women coming in? What's our dress code? How do we talk with the inmates? So they just had a lot of questions about our services and the things that we would do and how we would conduct ourselves with the inmates. And once we were able to explain all of our services and that we're willing to work with them and follow their protocol and their procedures, as long as the inmates' rights weren't being violated, we were able to start building some trust.
So if you talk about your safety and the concerns that they had, were you also able to have a conversation with them about, and a transparent conversation really about your privilege as an advocate and your safety concerns for the inmates as well and for the survivors? Were those part of the conversations as well so that they could understand where your role was coming from as well with maybe the limited amount of information that you would be providing to them?
Yeah, it was really a challenging conversation in some ways to discuss our safety and the confidentiality rights of the inmates. How do we ensure that advocates going into the prison are still safe, but we're respecting the rights of the inmates? So what we came to an understanding of was that the captain informed us that whenever we have concerns, we have to, ask, can we do this? Can we do that? Where are we able to meet with the inmates? Do we feel safe meeting with the inmates in this area? So what we ended up doing is we established that we would meet the inmates in one of their medical facilities only. So we wouldn't be going into the different areas, so that it was the same protocol each time, that all of the staff knew and the inmates knew where we were coming. Depending on our safety concerns and the safety concerns of the officers, we were able to meet with the inmates. There is a private room in which there is a large window on the door, and the only way I can explain it is there's a cage inside of the private room in which the inmate would sit. The advocate would sit on the outside of the cage, and the door would be closed, but the officer can still see directly in to ensure that the advocate was safe. And
so there's a lot of things that you had to keep in mind, right, as you were thinking of your own safety and the safety of your advocates. And I'm always curious to know a little bit more of how that conversation went with the inmate or the survivor itself. Were you able to kind of have a conversation with them and letting them know that that was the best setting for the most confidential support, or how was that conversation with the inmate or the survivor?
So that conversation actually goes pretty good with the inmates. I'm a firm believer in being open and honest. So I always let the inmate know, hey, for safety reasons as well as confidentiality reasons, this is where we're able to meet. Are you okay with us? And I do give them an option, but I let them know, we have safety concerns, and I want to help you and I want to be there for you, but we still have to work within certain parameters. And thus far, inmates are very understanding, pretty much very respectful of what our safety concerns are. And, the minute that they start, giving some type of attitude or are disrespectful, we're really quick to let them know that we're here to help you, but you also need to be respectful, and these are the confines in which we're able to work within. And for the most part, we don't get too much fight back from the inmates on the confidentiality.
Good. I'm glad that you're sharing that it's very important to, and I think we've mentioned this in other trainings, that it's very important to have very clear, transparent conversations with the survivors as well, to let them know what your capacity is at the moment, right? To let them know where you are at the moment, right? So that in order for you to provide the best services to them, they're not expecting things or hoping that things might happen or whatever it might be, but there's a transparency in this is the space that we have, and I'm here to provide these services, and this is why I'm here for. So thank you for sharing with us that story, Angelina. And can you share a little bit more about And you've been involved in a lot of the work, and a lot of the work has come from the relationship building aspect of it. But can you share a little bit more about what worked for Valley Oasis as this work was being developed and as it continues to be a sustainable program?
Sure. My approach when this first started with my program manager, Lisa, was the concept of we're going into their home. No one likes it when someone comes into your house and tells you how to do things in your home, what someone believes you're doing wrong in your home. So we have to remember that that facility that we're working for, that's their home. They've got their own culture, their own rules, their own processes, and even though we have a job to do, it's not our place to go in and just tell them that they're doing something wrong or that they need to do it our way. So with that approach, it made it a lot easier for them to open up to us and welcome us in.
And I think you said something, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think you said something really important that, you know, just like you're going to learn their language and learn their policy and learn how their systems work, you know, it's also important for you, just like you mentioned earlier, to be clear for them to learn where you're coming from as well, right? And have that information as you go on and continue to build a relationship.
Exactly. Learning their culture is really important. With Taylor coming on board, part of our training is going through what their policies and procedures are for handling inmate sexual assault. What is the difference between inmate on inmate? What's the difference between corrections officer on inmate or vice versa? The different types of forms that they have to fill out, because they're going to talk in acronyms and we're not going to be aware of it. So if we're not aware what that acronym or that form is, how are we really advocating for our survivor? Because we're not. But at the same time, too, when we learn that culture, we're also showing the staff that we are here for the long haul. We're not just here because we're being told that we have to do this for this period of time or because it's being funded by the grant, and once the money runs out, we're taking off. We're letting them know that we have a long-term vested interest in ending rape within the prison system. Part of that is also demonstrating to them that we're there to make their job easier, not to make it harder. So when we start learning what the different forms are and how things run, when we are meeting with inmate survivors, we're pretty quick to figure out which inmate is actually there for the right services and which inmate is manipulating the system. If we have an inmate that's coming in and just wants a private cell because, you know, they don't like their cellmate, but now they're saying that there's a sexual assault, and when they're giving us form names, we're able to say, you know what, that's not the right form that you filled out. Did you do this form and did you take this form? And in conversing with the inmate, you can learn pretty quick whether or not they're there for the correct reason. And that helps the ISU understand that we're not just going to be in there to let the inmates just take advantages of the services. We're there to offer, but we're also there to correct the inmates and say, hey, we have a service to provide. If this is the services that you need, we're willing to help you. But if these are not the services that you need, then we can't help you with other aspects because that's not what we're here for. So we're always very honest and direct.
And I think you said two really good things. You know, the importance first of understanding their language, right? What we've learned through the project is that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have them clarify something that you maybe never have heard or an acronym that you're just not familiar with. Because the more that you ask these questions, the more that they're willing to share and invite you more into the language that they have, and also understand that you are there because you do want to learn and help them have a safer place, right? A lot of they work with the mentality of this needs to be a safe place, and there's rules and procedures to keep the facility safe for everyone, for inmates and correctional officers. So it's important, and we encourage you to ask questions to your PCMs or the staff that you eventually will get to know, because you will get to know other staff while you're at the facility. You know, and again, going back to having that transparency with the inmate and the survivor, right? With letting them know that you are there for specific services, and that also helps you stay within your capacity, right? We talk about, and in other trainings, we talk about how it's a lot of inmates, this is the only contact that they might have, right? So that they need that. They need the human contact, and that they might get off topic, right? They might ask you to do something that it's not okay to be asked to do. So to have these clear conversations with them is important so that you keep them safe, right, and you keep yourself safe, and that the relationship that you have with the facility is also balanced as well. So thank you for sharing those things.
Yeah, it's all really important to be open and honest with both the prison staff and the inmates.
Yeah, I think that's something, you know, you said it quite well, that it's important to keep that in mind, that it's okay to be honest with both of them, and it's okay to let them know your capacity and what you are there for, so that there's no question, right, of your intentions, and that they are aware of your knowledge and, again, your capacity, and that transparency does help in the long run. Thank you for that, Angelina. And like everything, you know, there's challenges, but we also want to hear some of the sources of pride that comes from Valley Oasis and the program that you've been implemented. Like you said, Valley Oasis and all of our RCCs are not thinking of just the amount of time that the project is going to be implemented, right? They're thinking after the project, how are we going to continue to provide services to survivors behind bars? So can you share a little bit about some of the sources of pride that you've had?
Yes. One of them is definitely having a strong relationship with our team. Our entire ISU team is phenomenal, and they have really good buy-in to the services that we provide. We communicate with them on a regular basis, just like Claudia does from Fresno. We ensure that part of that relationship is meeting with them face-to-face on a regular basis. During that time, we have an agenda that they are emailed at least 24 hours in advance, so that if there's any paperwork that we need or any new policies that have been implemented, that they have time to gather it for us for that meeting. And then once the meeting is concluded, we send out minutes to the ISU staff so that we're always on the same page. There's no questions about what we met about last time. We know what we're moving forward on. And that helps keep our relationship very strong because there's consistency, there's openness. So that really helps. Part of that, go ahead.
No. I was going to say you and Claudia keep saying the same thing, and I think it's something worth repeating, that consistency and transparency are very much key in having a strong relationship, right? Understanding your capacity, their capacity, and what you're there for, I think plays a big role in, like you said, moving forward, having these successful meetings and letting them know what you want to talk about, right? Again, going back to being okay with asking questions and clarifying things that you might need clarification with.
Correct. And we also have to remember, in order for us to build that strong relationship, we have to remember that the culture that the CDCR staff live in, and that's very structured, very rigid. There is a policy and protocol for everything that they do. So they expect that same structure from those of us from the outside coming into their facility, and it makes their life a lot easier. So if we maintain that same structure and consistency, they're very happy to follow that routine because it's in a routine that they're in every day.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Angelina. I was going to say Valley Oasis, but you are Valley Oasis.
I am Valley Oasis.
You are. Thank you so much. And again, we encourage everyone to ask questions. And if you don't have anything right now and you just want to be connected with any of our peer leaders or any of the other RCCs, please let us know. We are more than willing to connect you with your colleagues and your peers in the work that they're doing with PREA. So thank you so much, Valley Oasis. Now we're going to hear from Share Helpline, and Share Helpline provides services to Calipatria State Prison and the California State Prison in Centinela. Welcome, Share Helpline.
Hello. How's everybody?
Hi, Kenya. Kenya, can you share a little bit about the challenges that you encounter as you are moving forward with the work under the California Advancing PREA project?
Yes, we can. Brandy's here with me.
Hi, Brandy.
Hi. That's your hotline. Well, I think that they don't want. Somebody mentioned earlier, like, it's my house and I don't want anybody walking in. I don't know what to do. I think it's like that, but you have to kind of like be very strategic about it.
Mm-hmm.
For PREA is fairly new in the fact that they have to implement it, that there's auditors that are looking out, that they know that they have funding because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're wanting or they're needing to follow the standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we noticed that they saw us like, we know their authority, but they kind of saw us like their authority on terms of PREA standards. They thought that we were gonna go in there, we're gonna probably call the Inspector General, the Attorney General, or whatnot, right? So we kind of took a little bit of advantage. We did have one of our biggest challenges was at Calipatria.
Mm-hmm.
Their security measures, they're level 4, and their yards were just like out of hand. They really didn't think that they were needing our services, right? But since auditors were calling the crisis center at that time, we kind of took advantage of it. I remember that I had emailed that particular lieutenant, and I called him several times, no answers. I left them voicemails. No, they weren't returning calls. They weren't returning emails. But I remember that particular day, I was kind of fed up, and I got a call from the auditor. I was gonna obviously do the audit at Calipatria, and asking me questions on how we work with the facility, how we've had contact with the PCM, with the investigators, what, right? We help them with any interviews, accompaniment, everything regarding standards. So I remember that I told the auditor that I talked to her a little bit about what we do and how we service the prisons. And I also remember telling her, you know what, I'm on a one-on-one. Can I call you back? Or can you call me back at a certain time? She said, oh, of course. So I remember immediately contacting Calipatria Prison, and like always, the lieutenant didn't answer. But I remember I left a voicemail stating the name of the auditor that contacted me and wants to know information of the services we provide them with, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a chance, she's going to call me back. Call me whenever you have a chance. Like 15 to 20 minutes later, I get a call from them. We're able to schedule an on-site visit with them. They give us a tour. And I explained further, we as a team explained further on PREA services, right? And how beneficial it is for them as a staff and for the survivors to implement it the way it's supposed to be implemented, because they have rights, right? I remember one of the staff members from them, she walked out and she's like, oh my God, I need to get in contact with you guys because this is what they gave me on PREA. And it was like a little a business card with information on PREA. I was like,
so,
yes.
No, sorry, go ahead. And it's good to hear, right, that the challenges that you were encountering as you were starting to work and as you have the capacity to go in there and provide services, but that these challenges weren't coming from, not being ready, right? That were coming from them having questions too. And I think that's something that we forget to talk about, that they, as correctional officers or as staff from the facilities, also have questions that need to be answered, and sometimes they just don't have the ability to ask these questions. So and I'm glad that you're sharing that, Kenya, because it's good to highlight that you are there to also help them navigate the system or navigate what needs to be done and to be PREA compliant, so that at the end of the day, we meet our goal, which is provide services to survivors.
And they also meet theirs in following the standards, so it's like a win-win.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And can you, Sure Helpline has done a lot of work with different types of detention facilities. Can we talk a little bit about what has worked with the work that you are doing with your CDCR facilities?
Yeah, of course. So after I want to share this incident. So when we got a call, right? We agreed. We had a meeting at our agency with Calipatria and Centinela, the heads of who's running what and whatnot. So we had an incident in Centinela where there was a assault, and the client requested an advocate, and because they said it was unsubstantiated, they didn't want to provide the client service. So remember, I called I remember the captain called us. That day I was really upset because I wanted to take it further to assist the client, but how can I do it to keep it in a professional manner? So we were already scheduled for a presentation. There was several investigators and PCMs from other facilities that were brought to Centinela, right? So we were asked by the captain at the facility and on behalf of Captain Stark to provide a presentation on really what advocacy is, right?
Yes.
So and I remember the captain was there. He was listening. He was into it, right, into the presentation. So I remember I took advantage of it and I told Captain Stark, correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to point something out there. If nowhere in the standards does it say that a victim is not entitled to services because their investigation was unfounded, unsubstantiated, substantiated, etc. Is that correct? And she looked at me straight in the eye. That's correct. So there's really nowhere where it says that you can't provide services because it was unfounded or what. Or the resolution was if a victim is requesting services because he was assaulted or harassed, any type of sexual violence, really pointed out that they're still entitled to services, right? So the captain looked straight at me, and we walked out, and I said, "Oh, can you come back tomorrow because we're gonna have another for sure." And the captain walked out and he said, "Oh, by the way, can you contact me on Thursday so I can schedule that one-on-one?" Oh, for sure. So that's a way kind of strategic about it and highlight and point things out. Really, there's nowhere in the PREA standards that it says that they're not allowed services,
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that story because that triggers a lot of thoughts as well, right? So you have the ability to have these conversations with Captain Stark, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of now, right? She's been an amazing support in the project, and it's been, kind of that driving force to a lot of the changes that we've been able to implement in the project. And I love hearing the story that Kenya just shared because it is so important to go out there and do your research, right? Read a little bit about read the standards or read things that are related to the work that you are going to be providing so that when you're also having these conversations with your facilities that they know that you know what you're talking about, right? It's good to go in there and ask these questions, but it's also good to let them know that you are doing your homework and that you are finding out things that need to be figured out prior to even meeting with them. So I love this story, Kenya, and thank you for sharing it with us. Can you, you've worked, like I said, you've worked very hard. Your team has. You have an amazing team. You all the RCCs in the project have worked really hard, to implement a lot of the PREA standards within your facilities. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you are most proud of and what accomplishments that you're completely proud of and things that have completely changed from the beginning of the project?
Yeah, well, the connection we've built, I think we're very proud of the connection we've built with both facilities, even though in one, like I said, we're limited as to we're not yet providing support. That's a whole other. If anything were to happen, they will contact us. They contact us to need clarity on something because, I mean, they have to go off a manual too, and they have to law-abiding because that's really what they're enforcing, right? So they don't hesitate in contacting us. But we're very proud that we were brown-carded. We were trained and brown-carded, and we offered some services that were, I think, that are very beneficial. We have some health and wellness programming that we do, and out of that programming, we've found survivors, and we've been able to make a support group and provide them the tools to healing. Now, we're in a facility that we're in a sensitive needs yard. Everybody's familiar with that, right? If not, it's a yard where gang dropouts, sex law enforcement, a lot of the child molesters, all of the child molesters really, any type of perpetrator that can't be mixed in with general population, we have there. They earn their way there, and we've been asked, what other services do you provide? Because they obviously see our posters, our name, our number, and stuff, and they know what PREA is, but what services can we offer them? And we had one that was really services that we offer. We let them know, hey, we're not only here to provide these groups, and we're here just like you. My coworker says, just like without cell phone, we're as incarcerated as you are just right now. And we've seen the demand, we've seen the necessities of the facility, and these are the services we offer. So in that programming, we try to target any type of abuse, any type of child neglect, because it's not there just because there's psychomaniacs and they wake up one day and they want to commit a crime. Obviously, there's a story behind it. And if we can target type of violence and include the sexual violence with it, preventing, building connection with them, we know that we can get through them and provide them services. As you all know, mental health in those facilities is really, they have internal politics and they're not allowed to have any sort of mental. So we kind of go around the mental health route, but we're still providing some sort of mental health. And that was offered to the program manager. We met with the program manager. We met with the mental health, the mental health director from both facilities, and we offered it. And and we let them know, our plan is to target this, and so we can have more services for them. We can provide them in-person counseling, so we can let them know that we're here for them, because not a lot of people are going to report. That's for sure. And it's kind of like we want to really rehabilitate these folks and reduce the recidivism rate. So
thank you
it's kind of, and they were up for it, and they wanted, like I said before, they wanted a Calipatra, but right now they're having a lot of security measures in yards, and it's not available to them right now. But telephone service, written correspondence, and accompaniment, or anything, we provide them. So, but in Centinelas, you go 2 times a week. Like I said, we're targeting the groups that have the most necessities, and then we're going to move on from there. And I think it's been working great.
And thank you for sharing that, Kenny, because you mentioned several things that, that we need to start bringing up in conversation, right? That your services are there, and that not all of them are ready to disclose, right? Not everyone is ready to have a conversation about sexual violence or sexual abuse, and you are not going in there pressing and being known as we're only here for survivors who were sexually abused, right? That you're there to provide more of a broader amount of services so that eventually when they are ready, because it does take time, and just like in the community, right, it takes time for survivors to disclose, to reach out for support, to begin their healing process. And your team is very open and very trauma-informed in that approach, and that you're finally in there. You build a relationship with the correctional facility, and also made that transparent to them of what you were going to do in there and what your services were going to look like. And both ends know that at the end of the day, you are there for survivors, right? You are there for services and supporting survivors who are behind bars. And thank you for bringing that up, because like I said, that's a conversation that we don't have often. But that it is an important one, and it's part of that, building that relationship with corrections as well, because they know that you're not only there for survivors, that you're there for a lot of services that are within your capacity, within your agency's capacity. So thank you for sharing that, Kenya. So now, again, we encourage you to ask questions, and if you eventually, later on have a question or think of something that one of our presenters has mentioned, we encourage you to reach out to us, and we can definitely connect you with them as well.
I just want to point something out. They really don't know that you don't know, so that's the advantage.
It's true. That's why we ask questions. Thank you for, and you're right. This is a space to have frank and honest conversations, right? We might not all agree on everything that we are saying, but that's the system that we're going into, right? That's the system in which we need to start thinking outside the box and having conversations that maybe we're not super comfortable with, but are important conversations. And just like Kenya said, sometimes they don't know that you don't know, but as much, as you move forward, you are going to learn, right? You are going to ask questions. You are going to read and be part of webinars that are going to give you more of an insight of their system and their culture. So thank you for that, Kenya. And now we are going to continue with our webinar. Chris is going to share with us a little bit more about chasing the work.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our peer leaders who really gave us some really great examples on how to build relationships with your facilities. And as we heard from our peer leaders, getting into the door with our correctional facilities can be daunting. We often have to chase that work or push for those relationships to be built. They're not sort of there for us already. And we know that working with corrections can be confusing and frustrating because we come from different perspectives. But it's really vital that we're getting in there so we can accurately and appropriately serve incarcerated survivors. Next slide. And so like some of our peer leaders pointed out, finding an ally and building good relationships with individual staff at CDCR facilities is very, very important. And the PREA Compliance Manager, or PCM, is a really great person to start with. If you're not sure who your PCM at your facility is, please let us know and we'll help connect you with them. And although the PCM is a really great ally to build a relationship with, we know it takes more than an email or two to kind of build that relationship. And it requires constant contact via email, the phone, and in person to the PCM and other staff at your facility. It's really great if you can try to set up an in-person meeting with the PCM to encourage them to invite other staff to that meeting as well. If you can bring food to that meeting, that's always great. Everybody loves food. If you don't have it in the budget to bring food, think about some other things you might have in your office. Do you have stickers or buttons that you hand out in the community? Bring that for the staff. Show that you care and you want to bring things for them. Also, finding a strong ally is vital to doing this work. And sometimes that ally is not easily identifiable and isn't always the PCM. So maybe it's someone that works in classification, and you can help to work with them so that they can tell you if someone discloses sexual assault during the intake. Maybe it's someone in mental health or medical that you can work with to set up contact with survivors that make disclosures during their sessions. Or maybe it's a CO that's willing to escort you every time you go into the facility, or a CO who will be willing to periodically test the phone line for you. So there's a lot of different folks within a facility that you can connect with and build relationships with. The stronger rapport you can build with your allies and the more people you have on your team, the better you can reach survivors and provide services. And so sometimes it can be really frustrating when you've met someone, you've developed a good relationship with them, you've talked to them several times in person, but then you realize that you don't have their contact information. A lot of CDCR staff do not have business cards like maybe you do as an advocate, and a really handy tip is that all CDCR staff have a standard email format. So it's just their first name dot their last name, then cdcr.ca.gov. And so we really encourage you to kind of use this so that way you can contact staff regularly. If you don't have their contact information, this is a great way of just knowing at least their email. We also encourage you to start documenting your contacts. So not only you remind yourself when you spoke to someone last, but you can make sure you're following up if you haven't heard back from them. And so in the chat box, Juliana is going to add a contact form that I used to use when I was working with facilities in South Carolina. And I really encourage you to make similar templates and format it in a way that makes sense to you and your agency. So this is just a form that you can, again, just document who you've talked to, when you talked to them, and what you talked about. Because like a lot of our peer leaders pointed out, sometimes we'll send a lot of emails or make a lot of phone calls, and then we kind of lose track of whether or not anything was resolved in those or if we got the connection back. Thank you. Next slide. And so once you've identified some of your allies, it's important to think about how we want to frame what we're offering. So how we're going to highlight our services. And when you're working in corrections, you can always remind staff that your agency's work isn't just for people who are incarcerated, it's for them as well. That you work with folks in the community providing support, and that if they or a loved one is in need, that they can call your hotline or come in for services. You can think about ways that staff might have run across your organization before. Maybe they've seen your billboards, or maybe they've heard of an event that you host annually in the community. You want to build that connection and try to build it beyond just what's inside the prison and what's available for PREA. This helps gives a more holistic picture of your agency for corrections staff. You can also start by seeing what the facility is already doing and where they feel like they might need help. Maybe they need more programming or help with staff and volunteer training, and you can offer to assist them with this or connect them with DAs, SAFEs, or other community organizations. You can also offer to attend briefings or other meetings that are not specifically related to PREA, so that staff can meet you and you can show that you're really trying to see what's going on within the facility. When talking about the services that you're hoping to provide, it can be helpful to remind staff that you are not there to tell them what to do and frame your services as something that will ultimately make the corrections staff's jobs easier. And a lot of our peer leaders pointed this out. We do know that when a survivor is able to access outside help, they are less likely to cause what corrections labels as issues because they are receiving care that is allowing them to process through the trauma in a healthy way. Many times, incarcerated survivors who come forward are labeled as problem inmates or troublesome by staff because they are reacting to their trauma and not receiving care. But if we're able to provide that care, the survivor has a healthy outlet that the staff no longer has to deal with. We want to remind staff that we can help with this, that we can be an outlet for these survivors. We can get really excited about what our services could look like inside a prison, but it's important to hold these plans lightly. We can offer suggestions on how things could work, but always remember to solicit ideas from corrections staff and the PCM. The staff are going to know details that you don't know, such as what time is going to work best for the facility, or maybe what room is going to work best. And it's really helpful to get feedback from different levels of staff, not just upper-level management. So for example, ask the person at the entrance what you can do to make getting in easier. It can help to check with mental health staff as well so that they know why you're in the facility and kind of where they think that you could help augment what they're already doing. As always, being consistent and reliable is vital. If you say you're going to be there every third Tuesday at 3, make sure you're there every time. It's always great if you can send a reminder if you're going in person. And we know it's very frustrating when you're putting in the time and effort, but corrections is seemingly not. We want to assume best intentions, but also remember that if it wasn't what you were planning, it's still making a difference. So for example, if you and the PCM were supposed to meet, and the PCM canceled your meeting after you had gotten all the way to the facility, it still is not a waste. Go in, try to talk with some other officers, say hello to the AW. You're still making your face known, which is really, really important when building a relationship with corrections. They need to know who you are and kind of where you're coming from. And until they know your face, they're not going to be able to do that. Next slide. So sometimes starting PREA work is not only a challenge with the correctional facilities themselves, but within our own agencies as well. It can be really hard to focus on our work with incarcerated survivors when our own agency doesn't leave space for this because we're so used to working in the community. And one of the main things we can do to help sustain a solid PREA program is to make sure our PREA work becomes a habit. We can do this by, like Matthew talked about, keeping a schedule that the rest of our staff knows about, but also having regular weekly times where we connect with folks at our correctional facilities and making sure that you're documenting these things. Try to have at least monthly consistent times when you're going in person to your correctional facilities. Again, as a lot of our peer leaders have pointed out, those emails and phone calls aren't enough. You need to have your face within a facility. But making sure you keep these meetings and contacts regular will help keep them sustainable, even when our individual positions at our own agencies change and grow. Also, if you have regular staff meetings within your RCC, make sure there's a space for you to talk about your PREA program and services, even if it's brief, or you just say that there hasn't been any changes since your last staff meeting. You can also suggest changes on your intake forms, your client intake forms. So for instance, is there any space for you to check off that your survivor is incarcerated? And we're going to talk more about what intake forms can look like in our July webinar. Make sure that all your staff and volunteers are trained in working with incarcerated survivors so that everyone is prepared to work with someone who might be incarcerated. And it's a really great way and a tool that you can use to help with training is the modules that can be found on the CalCASA website. Making your PREA work a habit at your agency can really help make the space so that you have the energy to keep pushing into the door of your facilities. We're really thrilled with the innovative ways our rape crisis centers have been getting into their correctional facilities. And we know that a lot of us are running into similar issues that our peer leaders have, and our staff here have heard from other RCCs. So remember that you can always contact us here at JDI or at CalCASA. Juliana?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for giving us such an amazing insight and a recap of the things that we can start doing as we continue to reach out to our facilities. And again, something that we don't emphasize enough, and we've, kind of started having more open conversations about as the project has been moving forward is that, all the things and all the resources and tools that we can provide, and it might be okay that they don't necessarily apply to you and your capacity and your agency. So we always encourage you to also reach out to us so that we can have conversations and assess your situation and assess maybe the next steps, right? And we can help you and support you with those next steps and identifying what can potentially work. And if it doesn't work, we'll regroup again and try to figure something out. So we are always here for that support. And just to wrap things up, we are going to talk a little bit about what's next, some upcoming trainings, and ongoing resources. Many of you joined us for the March 15 webinar, which featured special guest CDCR statewide PREA coordinator Captain Shannon Stark. And Captain Stark has oversight over the entire CDCR system, and it's her job to ensure that PREA compliance managers at each facility are doing what they're required to do to keep inmates safe. So ensuring greater access to the services for the California advocates have provided or have been a key driver for the entire project. So that's something that we've worked really hard to accomplish. And as we learned on March 15, there have been some significant breakthroughs. For example, Captain Stark helped usher the new policy so that survivors of sexual abuse and sexual harassment held in CDCR facilities will now have access to free and confidential phone calls to California rape crisis centers, which is amazing. So if you missed that webinar that I just talked about, please feel free to reach out and request a copy of it, and we can send it your way. Here are the posters featuring your agency's logo with the phone number and address, like the ones that are going to be, these are exactly the ones that are going to be housed in areas at your local CDCR site. Some of you have been receiving some calls already from inside CDCR facilities, but the whereabouts in the past of those calls were monitored or recorded, right? So they will now help protect survivors' confidentiality in an environment that, almost is never confidential as we understand it. So as awareness among survivors at CDCR sites grow, that there is now meaningful access to emotional support services by phone, there's also going to be more of an opportunity for you to extend your hand and reach out to the facility to provide services to them, support to the facility and the survivors that need your help. So it's going to be important to make sure that that everyone that is answering the hotline gets some sort of basic training on PREA. We understand that sometimes the volunteer coordinator answers the phone calls, and your volunteers might be answering these phone calls. So we encourage you to introduce them to these flyers so that they understand that there's different challenges that they need to be aware of as they answer these calls. Some of the things that we want you to keep in mind and consider is that you might see an increase of volume of calls, right? And these are some of the conversations that we had when Captain Stark was part of our webinar. Another thing would be that survivors may be in a public space, so even though the phone calls are not recorded and are confidential, it doesn't mean that the space that they are is going to be. Be aware that there might be time limitations, and that those who are responding to these calls from your agency know that, and that they gather the information that they need to gather in order to provide follow-up services. And also make them aware that people might call with other concerns that might not be within your capacity, and prepare them for these conversations as well. It's crucial that we should begin sharing this information to staff so that when they are responding to these calls, they are successful and that they provide a timely amount of support to survivors. And we invite you to mark your calendar for the following events. So in July 10, we will be facilitating receiving crisis line calls from incarcerated survivors. This webinar will give us an opportunity to collaborate on things to consider and best practice as RCCs are receiving these calls. We encourage you to invite other staff, your volunteer coordinator, your hotline supervisor, people that might be responding to these calls. We invite you to invite them to be part of the training. And some of you know that the team has been traveling up and down the state facilitating community-specific trainings on transgender survivors behind bars and identifying human trafficking behind bars. If we've been in your region, thank you for being part of the training. And if we haven't, keep an eye and check in with your Calcasa region representatives for more of an up-to-date information on that. Our next training will be held July 20th for the Mid-Coast Region Agency. So if you want a little bit more information about it, or if you have some questions about it, please make sure to ask or contact one of us. And as always, we are here to help. We are here to support you in any way that we can. If today's conversation trigger other thoughts or other questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or email us. Either through advocate@justdetention.org or PREA@calcasa.org. A lot of you have our personal emails as well, so we encourage you to reach out via that outlet if needed. Here are some of the ongoing resources. These are resources that we like to highlight every time we have any type of training. justdetention.org has a number of archived webinars related to a lot of the work that we are doing with PREA. Calcasa houses the online modules as well as several other toolkits that assist in resources in moving forward with the work that we are doing behind bars. And our favorite is the PREA Resource Center. They have, a number of webinars and a number of just resources that help us understand a little bit more about the back end of PREA and the things that our facilities are being introduced to. I especially like a lot of the webinars from the PREA Resource Center because a lot of the staff of facilities from all over the country participate and they ask questions, and it always gives me an insight of what their mentality is as they're participating in these webinars. At this time, if there's any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. If you don't have any, that's okay. We are always here and willing to provide any type of support as you're all moving forward with the work that is being done behind the walls, and we completely understand that there's a lot of questions and a lot of challenges that you're going to encounter, but the work is there and it's needed, right? At the end of the day, we want to be there for survivors, right? We want to be able to provide services to them, and all these challenges that we encounter are nothing compared to a lot of the healing that they have to do. So we are an amazing team, and we have an amazing group of rape crisis centers who are battling on a daily basis to go in there and provide these services to survivors behind the walls. So please don't feel like you're ever alone. Please reach out to us whenever you have a question, or if you just want to vent about something, just reach out to us so that we can definitely provide the support and move forward, so that at the end of the day, and even when we're gone, that survivors behind bars have services and have access to you all. Seems like there's not a lot of questions, and that's okay. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of information that we all have to process. But again, I can't emphasize it enough. If anything triggers, if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, if you just want to vent, like I said, please feel free to reach out to us. We love to have conversations with you, and we love to hear more about what's going on with your agency and your facility. That's also how we learn and how we can advocate at the system level. You all are the driving force of the work that we do. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for participating in today's webinar. Have an amazing day, and thank you all who participated. Thank you to Valley Oasis, RCS Fresno, Sure Helpline, JDI for being great partners, and thank you for just being you. Have an amazing day, everyone.